Thank you, Carlos. I think every marketing technology conference should start with a warning about where the fire exits are. That's actually really helpful. You know, this is a space, it's on fire, but you know, all right, never mind. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's so great to see you. Just so you know, I came in yesterday from Boston, so I'm a little bit off on the time zones. It's sort of like you could imagine you're in your bed, it's 3 a.m. in the morning, someone shakes you up, get up, get up, get up, puts you up on stage. Okay, can you explain this marketing technology thing to us? Yeah, all right, so bear with me on that. So for slides, you cue me up. Terrific. Whenever I see this photo, somehow I think this is a way of capturing what it's like operating in the marketing technology world today. You sort of have to just leap off into it. So as far as my background, I wear a few different hats in this space. I professionally have been a marketing technology software entrepreneur for many years. I was the co-founder of Ion Interactive. That company was recently acquired this year, so I'm doing my part for consolidation in the MarTech industry. I now currently work as the VP of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot. But about 10 years ago, I also started this blog, chiefmartec.com, which was really a very niche-y subject at the time. This idea of saying, well, what happens as technology gets more and more in marketing, and you have technology people infiltrating, invading the marketing department. And so that was the genesis of that blog. And surprisingly, over years, what was a very, very niche topic started to have a lot of relevancy to many, many companies. And so about 80,000 readers on that blog at this point. We started our MarTech conference, and I'm very excited that you have a copy of the book, Hacking Marketing. So that's enough about me. The marketing technology, state of marketing technology here for 2017, 2018, I think it might help to go back, not too many years ago, 2011, to this very first graphic that I put together at the time. I had seen a graphic similar to this, just for advertising technology, by a guy named Terry Kawaja at Luma Partners. I thought, wouldn't it be cool to see how many different marketing technologies not just for advertising, but for all the other aspects of marketing that people were using. And so I assembled this graph. At the time, it didn't take that long. I want to say about a week or so. And wow, I remember sharing like 150 marketing technology companies. It seemed kind of overwhelming. I mean, like, how would you even choose among 150? In the good old days. And I came back the next year. I tried to do a different graph. I was trying to find a better way to organize this because there's so much overlap between different categories. I was trying to come up with almost some sort of weird Venn diagram thing to overlap different categories because I thought that would make it clearer. I failed miserably. Yeah, this is the most confusing graphic ever. But in counting up the number of technology companies, just 1 year later, I found 350. So I took a year off, and then I came back in 2014 with a slightly different organizational scheme. I was imagining, okay, how about we think of this in the sense of these sort of platform companies, and then this group of companies we think of as marketing middleware, what was tag management, data management platforms, and then more specific applications within marketing. Still a ridiculously confusing chart, but I felt at least we're moving in the right direction. But again, at the end, I counted up the number of companies. I was astounded. It was nearly 1,000. Now, this was when we started to get, feedback of saying, okay, well, this is an industry that's clearly ripe for consolidation. And I was starting to think, good, because this is no longer taking just a week to assemble. But then 2015 came along, went through this exercise again. At the end, I counted up as nearly 2,000 marketing technology vendors. And I know this wasn't all of them because as this graphic started to get more and more distribution, I would get a large amount of feedback from all the companies who were kind enough to point out that I forgot to include them on this graphic. There were a lot. Hundreds and hundreds. In fact, actually, sort of what was happening around this graphic was sort of surprising to me. I mean, right? You know, this idea of putting like little logos on a PowerPoint slide. I mean, I suppose it's a marketable skill, but it doesn't seem like a particularly strong one. But there was something going on where marketers out there, at least a subset of them, were getting really excited about this explosion of marketing technology. Someone had sent me this photo that one marketing agency had taken with the 2014 and 2015 landscapes. And these folks were walking around the streets of Philadelphia with this. Very, very strange. My wife saw this picture and she said, "You're not making any more of these landscapes. I don't know what you're doing, but it's not right, man." But while some people were getting really excited about this, it was interesting. This counter-narrative about consolidation really started to gain more and more traction. I remember shortly after that one, there was this article of, "Honey, did we shrink the marketing technology landscape?" Dom Nicastro at CMS Wire, a terrific writer, interviewed a number of industry analysts, number of experts at large companies, and basically the consensus was, okay, many of these 1,876 vendors will fold, others will merge and be acquired, and the landscape will shrink because of it. I'm not going to call out which particular industry analysts guaranteed that was going to shrink, but you know, it's kind of impressive. And you know, I'm an empiricist. You know, I don't actually have a dog in this fight, like whether it grows or it shrinks. I'm just, hey, this is what it is. So, okay, let's see. Will it shrink? Well, 2016 comes along, and it does not shrink. I made some changes to the organizational structure here. And I use the phrase organizational structure lightly, but I calculated all these different vendors, and all of a sudden we've gone from like 1,800 to around 3,500. Now even I'm at this point where I'm like, okay, this is getting a little out of control here. This is no longer taking a few weeks to assemble. This is becoming like a multi-month journey. But again, same reaction. There were a whole set of marketers for whom, again, this explosion of marketing technology, well, not without its challenges, was being embraced as something really exciting. You know, we know marketing is changing. It's just sometimes hard to quantify how much it's changing. And in some ways, I think that's one of the few things this landscape actually does, is by, you know, calculating up all these number of different vendors, it is in some small way a quantifiable measure of just how much new innovation is happening in our space. This guy, Sean Gooden, he at the time was the chief marketing technologist of Clorox. He's now at JP Morgan Chase. He's on our advisory board at the MarTech conference. And Sean is a very tall guy, so he had to grab this display thing they had to try and put it in context of the size of the landscape they printed. I see Carlos printed a few super large ones out there too. So this is fascinating, but then at the same time, this counter narrative of like, okay, this just can't continue. This article, on VentureBeat, we're now getting more specific in why it's going to consolidate. Shrinking financial markets will drive consolidation in MarTech. Another one, consolidation is rampant in 2016 marketing technology industry. Rampant, all right. It'll blow away anything previously witnessed in this sector. I suppose you guys know the punchline of where this is coming, because 2017's graphic came out and it did not shrink. Luckily it didn't double. It only grew by about another 40%. But now it's upwards to like 5,000 different marketing technology vendors. 5,000. And this still isn't all of them. There's a number of people who now track this industry. There's a set of folks over at a company called Cabinet M that have a master database of this stuff, and they've assured me they're tracking now 8,000 marketing technology vendors. So this is pretty crazy. And as far as consolidation goes, I had some help this year from a good friend of mine, Anand Thakur, because now this is no longer just taking me multiple months, this is taking me and someone else multiple months. With his help, we calculated some of the data and found that actually from 2016 to 2017, there was churn, but it was only about 4.7% from the 2016 landscape that had gone away. Now don't get me wrong, actually 5% churn per year is a lot of churn. This is a very fluid environment, but it's in the scheme of 5,000 companies, churning 5% a month, particularly as new ones keep coming in, doesn't dramatically change the nature of this landscape. Of course, the very next week, the article that comes out is, okay, why marketing technology consolidation is closer than you think. Here's hoping. Whenever I hear the consolidation thing, I can't help my sort of wry sense of humor. Is like, okay, well, let's walk through the brief history of marketing consolidation to date. There's clearly a trend line here, and it's consolidating. I mean, some really fascinating dynamics have come up around this that I just wouldn't have even predicted. That as this landscape in the past year got more and more popularity, there were a number of people who actually came up with variations of this for particular segments or actually particular countries. There's a guy in Toronto who put together the Canadian marketing technology landscape. So these are all the companies that he found headquartered in Canada in that marketing technology sector. Same thing for him. As soon as he published this, instantly got swarmed with requests from people saying, hey, you forgot to include us. A good friend of mine at Vaus in Finland said, all right, hey, let's take a look at what the Finnish marketing technology landscape is. For those who say marketing technology growth is finished, no, it's actually Finnish. All right, sorry about that. But yeah, like over 100 companies based in Finland that are addressing some facet of this marketing technology environment. I mean, this is kind of wild. I mean, I've joked occasionally that, marketing technology could be considered an Olympic sport, but I'm thinking actually we might be able to get there in a year or so. All right. So, Carlos, I'm waiting for like the UK version of this. It's got to happen. Now, the truth is, these landscapes do cause people a fair amount of heartache. For the subset of folks who get very excited about them, there's a lot of other marketers, normal marketers, for whom, well, this is really hard to sort out what we want out of this incredible menagerie of technologies. I mean, I know we're going to have a session later this morning on SEO, search engine optimization. And so just looking at the search engine optimization MarTech category, I mean, just dozens and dozens and dozens of solutions. And I mean, talk about confusing. So, I go through and I'm looking at every single one of these, and I always find these fascinating patterns. Like this past year I found, okay, there's this company in SEO for rank tracker, tracks your ranking in, Google. There's a separate company called Rank Tracker with just the R. And then there's a third company, none of these companies are related to each other, called Pro Rank Tracker, really trying to, I mean, like, seriously, this is a lot of competition. In fact, actually, as I'm going through these thousands and thousands of logos, and you might be questioning my sanity, one of the few ways I keep sane is I find ways to amuse myself by coming across company names that I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. Like in the email marketing category, which is separate from the marketing automation category, a bunch of overlap. I found a company based here in the UK called Bullsender. I thought, what a great name. I mean, this is a company that really understands the content that marketers want to email. And perfect. But it's hard, right? If you're a MarTech company, you have to come up with some sort of name to distinguish yourself out of these like 5,000 companies. I mean, this is a really hard exercise in branding for anyone who's a MarTech entrepreneur. So it's fascinating to watch people take different approaches. One approach is just the call it what it is. What a great name for a CRM company. Less annoying CRM. Why should I choose you? Well, I'll give you one more. In the optimization category, so many fascinating companies here. This is actually, when I was working with Ion for many years, we started out in this category, so this 150 companies were my competitors. I found this company like 3-Minute Optimizer. I mean, again, another just great name for what do you do? Well, we optimize your website in how long? 3 minutes. But again, in a world where there's so much competition, I feel these guys have really set themselves up, because all it takes now is someone to come along and say, oh, okay, well, I've got a new company, I'm 2-Minute Optimizer. And, so, anyways, all right, so we could amuse ourselves. Certainly I could amuse myself for a long time on different names and logos. But it doesn't get us any closer to solving the problem of, okay, how do we actually deal with this as marketers? So I want to actually add a little bit of nuance to this tension between the idea of the expansion of the space and the consolidation of the space. Because the sheer number of companies on the landscape is actually not really telling the full story of what's happening. So we're going to zoom back in time. Actually, that 2011 landscape was not the first version of this I did. The year before, in 2010, I gave my very first presentation on this topic to a small search marketing conference called Search Insider Summit. The talk was the rise of the marketing technologist. Essentially why marketers, marketing leaders, should think about hiring someone with more of a technical background directly on their staff. And one of my exhibits for why they should think about that was, well, I went out and I found a bunch of marketing technology companies. I threw all their logos up on a slide and said, this is the world you're now dealing with. You've got, for companies of any size, even then, dozens and dozens of marketing technologies that are now what you're becoming dependent on to be able to execute your mission. And so I know my categorization scheme from year to year on the MarTech landscape is subject to much criticism. I criticize it myself. But some categorization scheme is better than none, so you can imagine what this would be like if we had 5,000 just randomly scattered. So it was interesting. I was giving a presentation last month to a search marketing conference again, making the argument why search marketers are actually particularly well suited to become marketing technologists. And I came across this and I was like, wow, I am really curious. From this set of companies I had found in 2010, how many of them got consolidated? A whole crapload. In fact, here I can look at it sort of, over a 7-year period, 61.7% of the marketing technology companies that I'd found at that time were acquired by someone else. And actually, I didn't include in this acquisitions by private equity firms, like what happened with Marketo or what happened with Lithium. If the brand remained an independent brand, I didn't circle it. But you could make an argument that there's some sort of form of consolidation happening there too. And if you add those in, it comes up to around 65%. And surprisingly, you'll see a couple with lines through them, but not many. I think maybe three or four. And those were the ones that just simply went out of business. So actually, relatively few of these just dropped off the face of the earth. Almost all of them were acquired. And their customers and their technology to various degrees were integrated. I mean, some of them, like Oracle, acquired at least 10 or so of the companies off of this. Adobe, Salesforce, a lot of the big players that you would have expected. They built their marketing clouds by picking and choosing these. But then also a lot of, just smaller acquisitions, one at a time. The company I work for, HubSpot, it acquired one company here, Performable. Now what's interesting is I actually looked at the charts for the survival rate, at least in the US, of businesses in general. And it turns out that over a 7-year period, roughly about 63 to 65% of companies will go out of business or go away. I think we can take consolidation in the sense of, just sort of acquisition as much as anything else. So in some ways, you look at this and you're like, oh my God, MarTech has consolidated ridiculously. But on the other hand, actually MarTech hasn't consolidated much more than, frankly, any other business. The reason why it keeps growing isn't because it has some sort of unusual dynamic on the consolidation rate. It's because of the new ones that keep coming in. And it's fascinating. I think of this thing like almost like a water balloon or something where like you squeeze on one end and the other end sort of, gets larger. I can't draw, I know that. But, like, for instance, the founders of Pardot, which is a marketing automation company, got acquired by ExactTarget, and then ExactTarget got acquired by Salesforce. So on one hand, you look at that and you're like, okay, well, there's consolidation. I went from having 3 companies, Salesforce, ExactTarget, Pardot, to having 1. Consolidation. The only thing is the founders of Pardot, after they cashed out, turned around and invested a whole bunch of money in launching something like a dozen other, marketing technology companies. So, 2 went away and 12 more came onto the scene. This is why this doesn't work. So I tried to come up with a diagram that would simply explain what was happening. We're all good. We can break early for coffee. So if you have a few hours to spare, you can Google the article for this. It's the system dynamics of marketing technology. And it really tries to go into all the factors, at least the ones I've seen, of why we see this explosion and what are the forces underneath it that keep trying to rein it back in from a consolidation perspective. And it's that explosion side. I thought I'd just take a few minutes to explore a little bit of this, because this really is what's driving that growth. I mean, part of it is we live in a world now where it's just easier to build software than ever before in history, right? I mean, thanks to infrastructure as a service from like Amazon and Google and Microsoft, thanks to open source software. I mean, almost anyone who has an idea for a novel piece of software can get it built. And they can get deployed on infrastructure that not too long ago would have required millions of dollars of capital funding. Now you can get it for a few pennies an hour. It's also a little bit easier to sell software. I mean, back in the days, not too long ago, when selling software involved convincing the IT department to install your software in their data center, and then the ongoing maintenance of how they would handle patching for that and updates. Software as a service, as a model, has completely blown that up. I don't want to say selling software is easy. For any of you MarTech vendors in the room, right? We know, I mean, it's still hard, and it's a very noisy and competitive market. But the mechanics of giving someone the ability to try software, to do trials, to be able to even just get a pilot project going, so much easier than they've ever been before. There's also this thing of just the environment in which we're operating today is in this direction of software exploding everywhere. I mean, this Moore's Law is like one example, right? I mean, we see this with AI. Why is there this explosion of AI startups all of a sudden? Well, it wasn't all of a sudden. There's been like 50 years of AI research, creating the algorithms for a lot of what modern AI is. It's just the computing power wasn't there, or it was just far too expensive to be practical. But Moore's Law steadily chipped away at this to a point where now, actually, you can get this sort of computing power and the storage you need affordably to now apply these AI algorithms in a way that's practical for real businesses. And then I think perhaps the biggest feeder into growth in this marketing technology landscape is the redefinition of what marketing actually is. I mean, marketing for a very long time was a peripheral department for most companies. It was sort of off to the side. They were the folks who handled the communications, the advertising, we'll do some press releases. You know, it was valuable, but it wasn't central to most businesses. What's happened here in this digital revolution where customer experience from their very first touch point all the way through them becoming a lifelong customer or an advocate, this is all happening through channels that marketing has largely ended up owning. You know, the web, mobile, social. Fascinating stuff happening now with chatbots, all this sort of stuff. And so what's happened is this fascinating thing where both on one hand, the responsibilities that marketing has have grown incredibly. I mean, marketing still has all the old responsibilities it had with advertising and public relations, but now it has all these other things too, like what is our web experience like? Is it a good one? How do we handle things on social media? And so as you have this explosion, and then all these new touch points that keep appearing, you know, chatbots are a great example. They just weren't a thing that long ago. Now, if as a marketer you aren't thinking, what sort of live chat options do we have on our website? You know, what's our way of engaging with people if they want to reach us through Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, right? I mean, this now becomes something like, okay, we've got to do this because this is where customers are going and we have to meet them where they are. And so what happens is all these new touch points keep coming up. There's more and more opportunities for novel software to come in to help marketers achieve that. Now the thing is, so as you might imagine, I keep myself fairly occupied just with the world of marketing and marketing technology. But the truth is, this is not a phenomenon that's unique to marketing. So Mary Meeker every year does her just amazing presentation for Kleiner Perkins of internet trends. And this year, in her deck of like 300 slides, one of the slides was talking about the number of cloud services that enterprises are using. And the data she'd come across, they break it out by different industries, but sort of if you lump it all together, essentially, the data shows that for most enterprises, they're running around 1,000 cloud services, SaaS solutions. And this is just the ones that they know about. And it's interesting. Okay, as you might expect, marketing is the #1 offender in this regard. So we've got, on average, 91 marketing cloud services at an enterprise. But what's a little bit surprising to me was HR wasn't too far behind. On average, 90 cloud services in a typical enterprise. I mean, going down to finance and accounting, 60. And sure enough, if you like Google, HR technology landscape, there's people who, I try and warn them away from going down this path. It's like once you get stuck on this, you're never getting out. They keep dragging you back in. Yeah, you can search and you can get landscapes of all these different cloud services available for HR. Came across one for the finance and accounting. I mean, phenomenal. In fact, this is only half of it. It actually goes on for another whole half. By the way, this is a good landscape as a marketer to bookmark, because when the accounting department comes to you, as they inevitably will, and say, you know, we think you're subscribing to too many cloud services, you can be just like, yeah, look who's talking. Anyway, I mean, we could do this on almost every department, every function in the company. It's not just marketing. This is a landscape of a waterfall in Iceland, because I figured by this point in time, having seen all these other landscapes, we could all use a nice little organic break. Now, not all of these companies are equal, right? That's another myth. It's not really a myth. It's just when we look at that marketing technology landscape, I mean, there are real information design problems with that landscape. One is it doesn't really show you what we saw with the 2010 to 2017 landscape, which is the fact that these things are very dynamic. There is consolidation happening. There are companies that are consolidating or going away at the same time folks are coming in. The other thing the landscape doesn't do at all is it doesn't give you any sense of the relative scale of these companies. Not every little logo corresponds to the same size company. And so if you look at it through that lens, you actually get what seems to be the phenomenon of the digital world is a long tail. You have a few companies that are multi-billion-dollar marketing technology platforms. You've got a growing number that actually have scale in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And then this huge long tail. And it keeps getting longer and longer. Of, again, in many cases, some very small companies that do one thing really well. They have customers who love them. They're profitable at it. And I think we're going to see more and more of that category. So that's a little bit of what's happening on the supply side. The other thing that's happened in parallel with this, right, entangled with it, is the demand side. I mean, marketers have largely embraced taking advantage of this incredible array of technology choices available to them. You know, for a while, the narrative that was being put forth by major companies in this space was, okay, we'll have one marketing cloud to rule it all. You'll just buy this one solution, and it'll do everything you need. And that narrative has largely gone away. I mean, this is data from the group at Walker Sands did a study that was released at the beginning of this year, that this idea of best-of-breed marketing stacks has really taken hold. And certainly for companies of any real size, it's almost always the state. With the MarTech conference, we've been running a contest for a number of years here called the Stackies, where we invite marketers to send in illustrations of their marketing technology stacks. And you can get all of these, they're up on SlideShare, just Google MarTech Stackies, and there's like 100 or so you can download. And it's fascinating to see how these companies go about approaching the conceptual design of their marketing stacks. And in recent years, we've had a few relatively large companies actually even open up their kimono and show us their stack. This was what Microsoft sent in earlier this year. You know, it's fascinating. So you look at it, this is just taking this one as an example. What they're trying to map out here is a little bit of this idea of the customer journey, you know, from early stage marketing going up to marketing qualified leads that then get handed over to sales, still in this flow. Then once they become actual customers, we have this whole notion of post-sales marketing, and the loop continues. The three different shades of blue you see here is based on a model that Gartner had proposed, this idea of dividing technology into systems of record, which are like your foundational systems, systems of differentiation that are a little bit more of the specific things of how your business operates, and then on top of that, this idea of systems of innovation, this ability to run lots of experimental technologies, things that you want to sort of push the envelope and try to connect in new channels, new touch points. And so all this deck, by the way, will be available for you, so you should be able to get all these slides. This is a stack that the folks at Cisco did. It has something like 37 marketing technologies here. And I remember one person commenting when they saw this, they're like, oh, this is just ridiculous that Cisco has 37 marketing technologies. There must be all this crazy overlap between them. If I'd had the Mary Meeker data at the time, I would have been like, hey, actually 37 is nothing. But the truth is, if you go through this, and it's an exercise worth doing, and you look at every single one of these technologies, there's not a lot of overlap between them. I mean, they're using Adobe Experience Manager for their website. They're using App Annie for tracking mobile. They've got BlueKai for their DMP, Brightcove for their video hosting. I mean, we can go around the circle here. There's not a lot of overlap. And this is one from the Red Wing Shoes. I wanted to give a stack that wasn't just a technology company. But again, same thing. You know, and actually this is a little more of a consumer-based marketing technology stack. And again, not a lot of overlap between the different components they're using. So I know this is overwhelming. Like I've watched so many marketers go through this process of coming to terms with the marketing technology landscape. It struck me that, you know, like people go through like the 5 stages of MarTech. There's the denial stage where like, hey, we're a marketing team. We're not IT. What do we need a stack of software for? Inevitably after that comes the anger phase. And like, whoever this bastard is who keeps coming up with all these slides that keep showing up in my board meetings, I really hate him. I get a lot of angry emails about this. It's not my fault. I didn't like start all these companies. Then comes bargaining. Like, okay, there's got to be some sort of way we can just, simplify this. What if we like buy all of our software from one company? Then once the reality of that starts to set in, it becomes the depression of, okay, this is not what I signed up for when I got a marketing degree. But the truth is, people make it through this. And they come out on the other end, and what you see with all these stackies is at some level a sense of acceptance that, okay, this is just the reality. Not just of marketing, but the digital world in general. All these other departments are wrestling with this too. And while it certainly has challenges, we can actually take approaches to manage this, to harness this. And you have to do this because the marketing technology landscape that I've put together, as it turns out, is actually only a fraction of the software that marketers are increasingly having to deal with. Right? It doesn't capture all of the custom software that marketers increasingly have to write. We can go through, like, this is apps from various brands for Apple Watch, and I think we can expect there'll be further iterations of the wearables industry. Alexa has something like 16,000 skills that brands have created. Custom skills. Alexa, can you order me that Domino's pizza? This isn't just a consumer phenomenon. There's now been this explosion of bots written for Slack. Brands having ways of engaging them that way. We're starting to see these new platforms for VR and AR. They're still not quite here, but I think everyone sees the writing on the wall. They will be soon. These will be new platforms that marketers will be creating experiences on top of. Internet of Things, we could have a whole session of just what's happening with that. But again, from a marketing perspective, it's like, whoa, wait a second. If our very own products that people have in their offices and their homes, how do we think about connecting that into a larger marketing customer experience? An article a year ago about a company using drones to deliver advertisements to people stuck in traffic in Mexico City. I'm thinking, so what, my marketing technology landscape now, I need a category for drone marketing? At some point, it's getting a little bit crazy, right? So there's no way to escape this. And actually, I think if we step away from thinking of this as a MarTech problem per se, and more of just, what is the challenge of running a business in today's world? To me, it comes down to one overarching challenge, which is just the acceleration of technology. The technology changes exponentially, more or less, right? This is Moore's law, but we've seen this just accelerating pace of new things coming into our world. And the problem is, organizations do not change at an exponential rate. I called this MarTech's law because I've seen marketing technologists wrestle with this dynamic, but it's everywhere. Now, okay, so that was a theoretical view. Is this real? Yes, it's real. That Walker-Sands study, we asked two questions. The first question was, how quickly do you think the marketing technology landscape is changing? And most people say, yeah, rapidly, steadily. Some people say light speed. That's super fast. I'm dying to meet the 1% that say not at all. I'm like, oh boy, let me sit down, let me buy you a beer, and I've got some bad news. But then the other question we asked them as a follow-up was, okay, well, how quickly is marketing technology changing inside your organization? And you see the curve shift. At best, it averages around steadily. A fair number actually slightly. And so this dichotomy between change that's happening in the external market and change that's happening inside our organizations is real, and this is stressful. So my last 10 minutes here, I want to just give you a little bit of how I've seen companies deal with that How do we address that? If that really becomes our problem, there's no perfect silver bullet to this, but there are ways we can manage it, hopefully better than our competitors can. So if we use the triangle of people, process, technology, people side, this is actually one of the reasons we've seen the rise of the marketing technologist. Marketing is a technology-powered discipline at this point in time. And so you've seen the rise of, this is some data we had collected earlier this year, companies mostly mid-scale to enterprise. Over half of them have someone who's explicitly in charge of marketing technology. Another 20%, 21% expect to have someone in charge of marketing technology this year. So you get around 75% and say, okay, actually, we have someone in charge of marketing technology. Now, you might suspect that since I ran this survey, my data could be biased. And if that's what you were thinking, good job, question all these surveys. But I happen to also get some data from an unrelated company, TBR, that does financial analysis, frankly, of the space. And they found in their study, 75% of the enterprises they connected with have someone who's in charge of marketing technology and getting that deployed throughout business units. So starting to get a few data points that suggest this is now something that the majority of companies are engaging in. And it's becoming relatively well-defined. From that, I know this is a little bit hard to read, but from that study that I did, we actually broke down what the responsibilities of people who are heads of marketing technology, what are they doing? Certainly researching and recommending solutions, a natural part of that. But the real meat of it is integrating these things, operating them, training the rest of the marketing department on, providing support. Some interesting things down at the bottom here. Almost half of them are customizing these solutions, which is a discussion for another day, but goes to that notion that, yeah, this isn't just off-the-shelf software. A scary number, small number, are not responsible for security or compliance for these solutions. I'm going to hope that's because there's a separate group that's taking responsibility for that as a checks and balances, but that might be too much to hope for. This is going to be, I believe, one of the biggest issues marketing technology faces in the year ahead. Certainly GDPR has pushed that to the forefront. At large organizations, you see the structure being developed of under marketing technology, applications responsibilities, infrastructure, development of more custom solutions, a lot of analytics and data. The folks at Dun & Bradstreet earlier this year put together what I'd asked them for something called an org stack. Instead of just like the marketing tech stack showing us your technology, can you give us a little sense of how you think of your organization in a world of this technology? And it's interesting how Rishi Dave, their CMO, has really integrated MarTech into their core demand generation. He has MarTech people who work on these Tiger teams. There's a whole article on what he's doing here with this. If you Google org stack Dun & Bradstreet, you should be able to get that. So that's the people side of it, right? We are seeing this marketing technology departments, in some cases under the guise of marketing operations, really become a solid professional force to keep companies on top of this. Process-wise, so wrestling with this ever-widening gap, there's not a lot of easy solutions to this. One overarching strategic thing is you as a leader get to decide which changes you're going to embrace and which ones you're going to forego. That's the biggest strategic decision you can make, because you can't deal with all of them. So selecting which ones go under that curve is really valuable. But the other thing you can do is you'll never be able to get an organization to be exponential in its change. But by adopting new forms of management that are really designed for today's environment, you can get more agile organizations. And so we've seen this rise of agile marketing, funny enough, being ported from the world of software and IT. If you don't yet know what agile marketing is, you're in luck. About 70% of the book, Hacking Marketing, that you got today walks through how agile works. But it's essentially going from this idea of these very long planned cycles to something that's much more iterative, that adapts as we go along. This is how software is built today, because software is constantly changing. But it's also now how we're seeing organizations in marketing, in sales, in other departments get this more adaptive approach to how they make it through. Another organizational thing we've seen, again, kind of came from the IT world, also in hacking marketing. It's this idea of bimodal organization. This started, Gartner had described this in the context of IT, how IT should consider managing projects that are more infrastructure-oriented versus how IT needed to manage more of these innovation-oriented projects. So trying to manage everything the same way is a recipe for making no one happy. If you can actually structure these things, that different kinds of projects are run different ways, it gives you a lot of flexibility. And so I shamelessly stole this in hacking marketing to describe this idea of how we can think about bimodal marketing. We can think about things that are our core operations, systems of record, and how we manage them. And then we can put together innovation programs that actually make it easier for us to trial and pilot things more out on the edge. You know, most of those get filtered out, but then the ones that we find as the winners ultimately get pulled back into the core. And so there's a lot of these strategies that you can look at. Again, they won't take you to be in an exponential organization, but they can make you more agile than your competitors. And at the end of the day, that's really what matters. All right, so the last piece of this triangle on the technology side is there's actually technology to help with the problem of all this technology. It gets very meta. On the marketing technology landscape, there's a category that's been just exploding these past few years. I think this most general category name for it would be called iPaaS, Integration Platform as a Service. There's a whole set of these folks now. In fact, actually, there's a report you can download. The analyst group AGC Partners. Is it AGC or ACG? AGC Partners actually has a whole report on this entire industry of these integration service providers, and it's amazing, right? This is things like, if you're familiar with, on the low end, maybe a company like Zapier. It just makes it very easy for you as a non-technical person to say, oh, okay, well, when someone fills out a form here on my website, I want to take that data, I want to send it off to my CRM, I want to load it up to this list in my marketing automation system, I might want to notify a sales team on Slack if there's a particular, qualification level they met. I mean, this notion of what they call citizen integrators is actually exploding. And the AGC Partners report actually quantifies how this market's growing. 41.5% compound annual growth rate. I mean, starting from a small amount, like 500 million. Well, I guess not that small, right? Going to be a multi-billion industry just on those solutions over the next few years. And the thing about this is this iPaaS technology solves the problem of letting us onboard and try new technologies in our stacks at a rate much faster than anything we've done in the past. There was a study by the folks Point Source earlier this year, IT-oriented study of, what was the average duration it took between a business request and then the actual deployment of a technical initiative. And this is here in 2017. You can see, okay, so for 80%, that time frame was more than 6 months. For a quarter, it's like more than a year. I know many of you have experienced this in your own organizations. This is really hard, right? This, again, goes to this thing of, the curve at which technology is changing out in the market and the speed at which we're adapting to it in our organizations is just too damn slow. And so this is one of the things that you see this explosion with iPaaS, is it's a way to help solve this a little bit, to just make it easier, to cut down the time frame from, hey, maybe instead of taking 6 months to integrate this in some sort of manual way with these other 3 systems, if everything connects up to the iPaaS hub, if we want to add something new, and we just connect that up to the hub, and then we can use some relatively simple business logic to pass the right data back and forth as we need. So the last thought I want to leave you with is, again, stepping back from this. This isn't really a marketing technology phenomenon. I mean, there's lots happening specifically in marketing technology. But when I think of marketing technology, like the classic way I thought of it was, okay, you've got these 3 domains of expertise, right? Marketing, technology from an IT, software development, and management, right? How do we think about the way we organize and run our businesses? And that MarTech in some ways has been this overlap of these three things. And then you think of a marketing technologist. What do? Well, they manage your marketing technology. Okay, boom, we hit all three things. But I actually think that's the narrow view of what's happening in business today, that it actually, if we're going to say it's a Venn diagram, it actually looks a lot more like this. It's far greater overlap. I mean, everything that marketing is doing now is being leveraged, is being implemented through some kind of technology. Marketers use so much technology every day. I once counted, if you count all the things that people do on their phones or the different website services they're using like this, like the average marketer uses something like 100 different pieces of software in a given month, and they don't even think about 90 of them. They just use them. Oh, wait, I was using Google to track this down. That's software? Yeah, actually, it's a piece of software. Software just becomes so embedded in everything marketers do. Technology, same thing. There is not anyone building technology who is not having an impact in your company, who is not having an impact on your brand. How well your back end, your back office systems work. What sort of data they have access to be able to then do the right sort of personalization. The speed at which these updates happen. The quality of them. All this stuff ends up affecting now the front-end experience in an incredible way. You cannot run IT successfully without looking at it through the lens of how is this going to change customer experience. And then the last piece of this is this idea of management. I would say in the vast majority of companies I look at who are wrestling with marketing technology, the bottleneck isn't technology. What they could do with the technology they already have is incredible compared to what they're actually using. The bottleneck is almost always these management structures, these processes, the way we've approached running marketing and our overall organization are from a world that was 10 years ago. And this world has changed so rapidly, customer expectations have changed so rapidly, that you have to think, how do we change the way in which our management of the organization takes advantage of this technology to really deliver the sort of marketing we want? It's not easy. This is probably the hardest profession to be in at this time. But man, what an incredibly exciting one. This is remaking what we think of as the relationships between businesses and customers. It is changing so ridiculously rapidly, but that's what makes this so exciting, so much opportunity to disrupt your own industries, to take the lead. So please know I'm with you 110% on, yes, this is a really challenging mission to wrestle with, but man, the opportunity that makes it worthwhile, you're going to be hard-pressed to, I think, find any other profession at this point in time that comes anywhere close to this. Thank you very much for having me. Enjoy the rest of your day.